The author of this book was inspired by some researchers, and these researchers had to convince the medical establishment to think about health and heart attacks in an entirely new way. And they had to get them to realize that they wouldn't be able to understand why someone was healthy if all they did was think about an individual's personal choices or their own set of actions. They had to look beyond the individual, and in this book Outliers the author wants to do the same. He wants to do for our understanding of success what the researchers did for our understanding of health. And he wants to focus on our environments too, and he will look beyond the individual. He's going to try to understand the culture successful people were a part of and who their friends and families were and where they all came from. The important part in this is that he had to appreciate the idea that the values of the world we inhabit and people we surround ourselves with have a profound effect on who we are. Jim Rohn says you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And as Tim Ferriss says, you are the average of the 5 people you associate with most. So do not underestimate the effects of your pessimistic or unambitious or disorganized friends. If someone isn't making you stronger, they are making you weaker. In other words, your surroundings determine pretty strongly who you are and who you become. Take for example smoking. This is obviously really bad for you. But why are there still so many people, despite the text and images on your pack of cigarettes, that are smoking? The number one reason is that other people are doing it too. And I know that it is addictive, but that is just after they are introduced with it. So rule number 1 is, our surroundings have a bigger influence than we think. But what is really an outlier? The author doesn't explain what an outlier is, but you can assume through the book that an outlier is someone who stands out from the crowd. An outlier is someone who is successful. But what is success? That is a real question. And that is for everyone different. Success isn't something that can be generally defined. But in a society like this, we have a frame for it. Success is striving to accomplish your desires, and perhaps beyond that, by a path you set out for yourself. And the key word for success is choice. Therefore, success is for everyone different because you can choose how success will look like for you. For this simple reason, it is very hard to define success in general, but I think that you agree, since you are watching this channel, that success is reaching for achieving your dreams, and that can be wealth, but it can also be something different. Success is the journey to mastery, and not only to mastery itself, because as we have seen in the book Mastery, you can't reach mastery. It's like an asymptote, you can only come very close, but hitting it is out of the question. And you will probably agree that sitting on the sofa watching Netflix isn't successful. And of course you can say, but if I choose this, I am successful, or but what if it's making me happy? Sitting passively in your room isn't something you can call success, even when you choose this, because you can't possibly think this is your dream, nor it can make you happy. Because short-term pleasure will only make you bitter in the long run. And I'm not saying that you can't watch Netflix anymore. I'm still watching House of Cards or The 100. But what I want you to see is that if you want success, you have to be more aware of how much you watch per week. So rule number 2 is, success is striving to accomplish your desires by the path of your choosing. Then another question arises. How can I be successful then? Malcolm Gladwell is the first that introduced the 10,000 hour rule, which I've talked about in other videos. And the rule comes from the researcher Anders Ericsson that wrote the book Peak, in which he says that it isn't really a rule, but we are going to summarize that soon. The 10,000 hour rule should not be confused with the Pareto principle, aka the 80-20 principle, which I did in one of the first videos. So, the 10,000 hour rule. What does this mean? It means that if you put 10,000 hours into your craft of choosing, you will become great in this area. Pretty simple, right? For example, you can play soccer pretty good and you have the ability to play paid soccer. You could say then that you have the potential to become just as great as Cristiano Ronaldo. And the same logic applies, of course, of being as great as Michael Jordan. What people really make outliers is work. putting in the work makes all the difference. 10,000 hours is the magic number that makes an ordinary person great. 10,000 hours is 5 years practicing for 8 hours a day. Of course, if you want it any sooner, this is also possible, but you just need to be willing to put more time in per week. And common sense forces me to say that being as great as masters like MJ and Ronaldo acquire more time. Scientist Anders Ericsson just says that if you put 10,000 hours in your craft, that you come very close, but outliers keep working on their craft after 10,000 hours. They will always try to improve even more, and that's what you need to be doing too. If you want so much, because if you want to be an outlier, an hour more will never be too much. So rule number 3 is putting 10,000 hours in it is what makes you an outlier. But even though you are putting the right amount of time in your craft, you can be failing, because there is one requirement for the time you put in: deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is what differentiates you from the rest. You can see it as practicing with enormous dedication, focused attention, and with constant challenge. And this is all about the subject of your own choosing. For example, if you study marketing, you can choose to read a book or to make the exercises that belong to the less material. And doing the exercises gives you the opportunity to see if you understand it fully. Therefore, is testing yourself better than just reading the material. You need to quiz yourself to be challenged. And if you are not challenged, you couldn't speak about deliberate practice. But to make the questions, it is very useful if you've read the textbook. So reading the material is required, but it is just for improving the effect of deliberate practice. It isn't deliberate practice itself. And why is this differentiation needed? Well, Malcolm says, for becoming successful, we need to put in 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. You are only allowed to count the hours of real practice, not the hours before. The hours of preparation, learning, or thinking do not count. Looking back on the given example earlier, reading the textbook of marketing doesn't count, but doing a quiz or exercises do. And another example, to make the point real clear, could be a salesman. Reading a book about sales can be pretty handy, but the 10,000 hours to become an outlier starts when you're really selling stuff to customers. For this simple reason, you can state that skills aren't born, they are cultivated through hard work. And practicing is the only thing that can move that needle. So rule number 4 is deliberate practice is required to become an outlier. To summarize, our surroundings have a bigger influence on us than we think. Success is striving to accomplish your desires by the path of your choosing. Putting 10,000 hours in it is what makes you an outlier, but deliberate practice is required to become an outlier. Thank you for watching, and as always, get your